His department's 2009 intelligence strategy warns that state and non-state actors, quote, are increasingly undermining U.S. interests in myriad and growing ways, unquote. While hacking often goes overlooked by the government there, internet censorship in China is heavily legislated. Inconceivable here in the U.S., most Chinese do generally welcome the idea of this legislation. Ironically, hacking is also so prevalent in China that it's become standard for businesses to attack each other this way. Just this past spring, two competing online gaming services who were vying for dominance involved internet users across 5 provinces within the country when a DDoS that was staged against the other by one of them essentially brought the entire network in those provinces to their knees. The reason for this was the ISP who controlled the network they DDoSed also happened to host one of the most popular video streaming sites in all of China. So the flood of unanswerable DNS activity is what actually crippled the network. Among several other interesting events in China, the government has banned the People's Liberation Army from outsourcing to civilian companies. This has not stopped the PLA from operating any of their front businesses, such as Tencent, China's most active social network, or from working with the criminal hacking group Asia Intelligence Center, who are led by a pretty shady guy with the handle Coldface. I think he read too much Dick Tracy when he was young. Nor has it kept them from working with the C. Rufus security team, who developed much of the code for GhostRat, which is a Trojan horse used by the Chinese to hack into some of the most sensitive computer networks on Earth. Brazil is increasingly becoming a key player in the global economic and political landscape, having no serious disputes with their neighbors and able to enjoy a fairly stable financial system. They have, however, some long-standing social problems, such as highly unequal distribution of wealth and an ineffective judicial system. Both boost crime in Brazilian society and cybercrime. Brazil, by the way, is the largest source of malicious cyber activity in Latin America and among the most active in the world. Financial cyber fraud dominates the Brazilian landscape, with a specialized community almost exclusively targeting Brazilian banks. Their highly skilled and active phishing community is rife with Trojan authors and ATM skimmers. Without laws in Brazil to address computer crime, law enforcement agencies are virtually hamstrung, and worse yet, there's a pervasive lack of cooperation between state and federal agencies in Brazil. The Brazilian cybersecurity community has adapted accordingly, with the banks implementing the bulk of security measures. They've even gone so far as to sponsor discussion lists, formal and informal security groups, and organized meetings to combat the cybercrime epidemic there. Brazilian lawmakers have made attempts at proposing cybercrime legislation, but they have failed repeatedly. One current project attempts to introduce cyber-specific issues into existing Brazilian laws. Unfortunately, the proposed laws include many burdensome provisions intended to facilitate investigation of cybercrimes. These provisions have angered the public, resulting in a considerable lobby against the law, arguing that ISPs and cyber cafes simply don't have the resources to comply. Let's see if I can point to it. This picture over here is actually of one of their protests. Now, realize that even with all of this, there have been several police successes. Just this past May, their federal police conducted Operation Track, a one-year investigation involving over 690 officers. They arrested a total of 139 people that were involved in various cyber fraud activities across 15 different individual criminal groups. One recent study showed that in just the first half of 2009, Brazilian authorities arrested nearly 350 people and seized over 70 skimming devices. Okay, let's talk a little bit more generally about the underground. iDefense has given one large segment of cyber criminal activity the label BBB attacks. These are phishing schemes used to target high-end executives of specific financial institutions. We call them BBB because the initial attacks that were discovered at iDefense were a very convincing bunch of phishing emails that used the U.S. Better Business Bureau. This chart from the last iDefense Trends report, if I can get it, there we go, shows activity for BBB attacks, the majority of which appear to come out of two Romanian cyber cartels, which iDefense has very cleverly labeled Group A and Group B. The Group A cartel has targeted more than 50 commercial Western banks, but was stopped in July of 2008 because the FBI arrested 30 of its members. Group B targeted more than 30 banks, but on April 24th of 2008, they stopped operation for some unknown reason, only to resume again in September. You see, the bad guys are targeting their attacks now because they've figured out that there's a difference between retail and commercial accounts. They realized that the commercial accounts were where the real money is. These are the accounts that the financial organizations use to transfer large sums of money between themselves and sometimes between large customers. The BBB cartels try to steal credentials for commercial accounts by targeting selected people in large companies with carefully crafted social engineering in the hope of circumventing the existing securities. And believe me, these attacks appear very realistic, often convincing the target to go and install a malicious ActiveX control designed to compromise their computer. Although the past and current BBB cartels had been focused on U.S. targets up until this year, iDefense correctly predicted that newer BBB attack variants were likely to target other geographic regions in 2009. Cyber criminals are becoming increasingly fond of databases, comprised of both personal and financial data. These are modern one-stop shopping sites on which criminals implement fully automated purchasing systems. Typically, these databases openly display indexed lists providing an inventory of stolen credentials, which are even searchable by the bank's ID number or BIN number. And with the count of credentials actually available from each bin publicly accessible. Virtually any information is available from these sites, and it's offered from a smorgasbord menu of choices, usually priced by credits, with one credit often equaling roughly $1 US. Now, our old friend Zoomer is believed to be the brains behind one of the largest of these databases, the Private Collider system. A former student at the State University of Technology and Design in St. Petersburg, this veteran of the Shadow Crew Carters and old friend of Kumbajani, unfortunately remains at large, partly due to several failed attempts at collaboration between Russian and U.S. law enforcement. Now, with the increasing popularity of personal firewalls, criminals have been forced to look for a new way to invade your computers. Enter the iframe. It's an effective means of propagating malware. Drive-by iframe-based installations have largely replaced worms as the primary mechanism for distribution of malicious content. You've all seen iframes. Their legitimate use is